last night that the prosperity mine people have appealed to the court to quash the decision, the recent decision.
Yeah. You know, the new prosperity mine, like I've been very fortunate over the past number of years to develop a really close relationship with its opposing people. And I had to tell you on that, when Stuart and I drove across Canada to catch up to them, one of the ladies at the AFN dubbed us the Red Bull Express, because they thought we're drinking lots of Red Bull so we could make it. And he started to call me Chief Red Bull. And then I asked the Tilco team, how do you say Red Bull in their language? And it's Boul Dal Dal. And so now they told me they've shortened it to Boul Dal. But to have that relationship with them, to understand their challenges and what they're willing to do, what they're willing to accept and not accept. I was very fortunate 2 summers ago to fly up to Fish Lake, to Teltombi. And it's so incredibly beautiful. I'm a big fan of where I'm from. I always think that that's God's country. But I've had the opportunity to travel to different places and to spend a day with the elders at Teltombi and to see them interact with their youth and how they were continuing the traditions of attachment to their land. So it's not something that it's an empty argument. It's actually something very real and tangible. That's the incumbent upon all First Nations to show that we continually do these rights that we're fighting for at the opportunity of infringement. I know you got one more question.
Okay. Well, I've done a fair bit of research on the Enbridge pipeline, and one of the problems that I would have with the anti-pipeline people is that they don't necessarily bring it to a common currency, and economists use like value of life, and can pretty much put an economic value on anything. And one thing I don't see is they're saying, yeah, this will destroy our lands and cause a great deal of economic hardship to us, but they don't necessarily put it into a common currency. And I was wondering, how do you feel that the anti-Enbridge pipeline people are doing about making a common case, or a case that can be understood by all Canadians?
This is, my response is going to be something similar to what I saw. There's a video about the repatriation of the Constitution of Canada, Dancing Around the Tables, I believe it's called.
Yes, sir.
You've seen it, okay. So Bill Wilson, he must he's from our village. And the one thing I remember him saying is that what they were pursuing is trying to fit us into their perspective of the world. And so I don't look at Canada and say, you have to take the values and the principles that our people have, and you must reform yourselves to fit into us. I don't see that as a respectful exercise. I wouldn't do that to any of our other First Nations. But when it comes down to these infringements, one of the things that I've known that Canada does not want to do is they don't want to come up with a dollar figure that relates to the infringement. I know when it comes to the fish farms and salmon, I mean, if they want to know what I had one chief from the Okanagan, he showed me this formula he developed to have a look at just how many fish we need. And what it was a quantifying of our rights in that one particular area. So when we want to talk about a common currency, it's kind of that's starting from a Western perspective, that's the only one that matters, is currency and what is profit. And so it's hard to quantify, like in those terms, what an infringement actually means.
Because they will say, okay, well, if a spill does happen, okay, here's the cost of the cleanup, and if people have to be relocated, here's the cost of relocation, and here's the cost of the assets of the town that can no longer be used. So they would put a financial cost to it, but maybe not encapsulating everything that you guys cherish.
I think, I mean, even this idea that industry or Canada can make the decision to relocate a people. That is, I'm not sure, I look at that as a very inappropriate response. I don't think that it's I wonder if there's going to be an oil spill. I believe that even industry and government have spoken about the inevitability of it, so there will be. And so I look to other examples around the world, or what where I was looking anyways. When you look at what happened, I think it was Kalamazoo, and the oil spill that happened there, and the amount of resources it took. You look at the oil spill in the Gulf, look at Exxon Valdez, and you can see if that's the best game industry has today, in my opinion, it's not worth the risk. And I know that there's many First Nations that view that. The interesting thing is we met with what we call we refer to them as the pipeline posse. So we had all the deputy ministers from the departments that are going to engage in oil and gas. And it was so funny, they're like, we're not here to talk about Enbridge. We were all talking about Enbridge. Right? We just didn't name it. But it was interesting to hear them and how they wanted to find, of course, they're looking for a path forward around our rights instead of actually taking them head on and accommodating them. But it didn't take too long for anyone sitting there to realize that they're going to, in my opinion, they're going to run roughshod over Aboriginal rights for anything that they want to do. And I think what the sad part is that's Canada choosing to disregard its own laws at the highest level and at the most foundational level of this country. And I think that the response is going to be equal to that. Because I've met many people, and we all, environmental groups have a view of the world, First Nations have a view of the world, people involved with industry have a view of the world, but I don't think that one should be at the expense of the other. And I would, if I had a crystal ball, I'd look into it and say that there's going to be some very clear conflict coming up in the next number of years. Just with the amount of tension, the amount of money we're talking about. I mean, we can't get through a program on TV without seeing another Enbridge commercial. They're going to look after our salmon. I find the hypocrisy of that. You got first government's going to expand fish farms. They're going to kill all the salmon, and then we're going to let this pipeline through so they can save the salmon. It doesn't make sense.
Andrew's got her hand up.
What are your thoughts on the BC treaty process and how the BC government doesn't recognize the royal proclamation?
Good question. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs is very clear in its opposition to the current BC treaty process. You step back and you look at what are the foundations of the BC treaty process. You see that the comprehensive claims policy of Canada is one of the foundational pieces. So the comprehensive claims policy is a suite of policies that Canada has, which has never been updated. And so it's frozen in time. And what's happened since that, you've had the Delgamuukw decision, you've had a whole range of First Nation favorable Supreme Court of Canada rulings, which is supposed to give direction to the government. So that would have to then affect the comprehensive claims policy, which would be the basis of the treaty process, but it's not. And the treaty, as I understand it now, is they're simply looking for agreements. And it's not one that's based on a full recognition of right and title. And the problem that I'm seeing right now, this is something that's really, with the way I can crystallize for you one of the greatest issues. If you wanted $20 from your parents, we used to ask for 50. It's just what we did. So now the First Nations realizing that the offer of land is going to be small in comparison to what they put on the table. They want to put a lot on the table. And we just received, I've been characterizing it as this wonderful gift from the BC Treaty Commission last week, where a neighboring First Nation of ours, whose origin is over in this area, just submitted a map of an expanded area of interest. That map, it covers 13 neighboring First Nations territories in their entirety. And what they're wanting is to have rights in a neighboring nation's territory conceptualized and put into their treaty. So as we were talking earlier about where we have to be aware of the Crown's duty to consult and accommodate if there's a potential to infringe on those rights. So if this nation here has rights in our territory and there's something that's going to go on that needs to be consulted and accommodated on, they would be in a position for economic benefit, they'd be in a position to have some measure of authority over our title area. And so these are just some of the flaws that I see. And I know if I was sitting down with any of you and we're going to negotiate, and I was going to loan you the money to participate, sooner or later I could say, I think it's time to pay me back. And I think that that's one of those subtle hammers that are at the table. I don't see, my personal opinion and that of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs is we want full recognition of our title and rights to begin with. Because when we start there, we would have to have a consideration of just what was the dollar value of resources taken from our First Nations territory. Because if the government wants to talk about ownership or having us turn over that land through treaty, they're acknowledging we own it. If we own it, those resources are ours. Those resources are ours that the governments have given instruments so other people can make billions of dollars off it. And I think that would be the first question that would need to be talked about, a fair settlement of resource activity in your territory. If we did that, I wouldn't need to borrow money from the government for anything, and we could become full partners in this thing called Canada. One thing I learned is life brings us all issues. Whatever that may be, whatever it may look like, no matter what it might feel like. I've learned that those are the things that really keep us from getting ahead in whatever it is that we wish to do. And so to have peace with yourself, to have peace with your experience of life so something's not coming at you sideways, is the best thing that you can do for yourselves and for the organizations you plan to work for or the peoples you plan to work for. Because if we can be as healthy and as strong a person individually, it sets the table very clearly to be more effective in any kind of leadership or role that you envision yourself taking on with the tools you're gathering here. And gosh, it's been a long time since I've been to university. It's back in the 1900s. But I want to thank Laura Ann for extending the invitation. As she mentioned, to help build her husband's house. That was a lot of fun. He's a university professor, a city councilor, and his son was very clear, real neat guy, and this half-breed Indian that wanted to be a chief. So we had some really interesting conversations that went on for quite some time. But again, I want to thank you all for letting me be here to share some thoughts. I want to thank our elder for welcoming us here. Certainly acknowledge again the First Nations whose territory we're in. And if ever have an opportunity to come back and speak, I would welcome that. And I think it's a good thing that you reach out to the current political realm as well as the legal. You won't find a better speaker than Louise Vandel. I'm a big fan of her. So thank you very much.